Welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's dive right into how we measure the true sustainability of a coal operation by quantifying its absolutely most vital resource, human capital. When we look at the extractives industry, it's so easy to fixate purely on the geology, right? The reserves, the extraction techniques, the mineral grades. But today, we're going to flip the script. We are looking entirely at the people who actually pull those resources out of the earth, and more importantly, how we can standardize the measurement of their working conditions.
Here's a quick look at our roadmap for today. We're going to build out a conceptual human capital dashboard, looking at labor relations and work stoppages, before switching over to workforce health and safety, calculating those key safety rates, and tying it all back to the true financial cost of coal.
So let's kick things off with Section 1, the Human Capital Dashboard. Why do we even need this data? Well, to properly evaluate a high-hazard industry like coal, investors and analysts absolutely need standardized metrics. We've got to track the operational risks associated with the actual people doing the heavy lifting. And the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, or SASB, gives us exactly that. They've built this rigorous framework so we aren't just tossing around vague buzzwords about human capital, we're using hard, cold, comparable data.
Think of it like a literal dashboard with two main consoles. On the left, we've got labor relations, tracking the social dynamics and stability of the workforce. And on the right, workforce safety, focusing on the physical environment, which is absolutely critical when you're dealing with cave-in risks and heavy machinery.
All right, moving to Section 2, measuring labor relations.
The first big dial on our dashboard is the percentage of the active workforce employed under collective agreements. This tells us a ton about the bargaining environment. Coal mining is physically grueling work, and labor unions typically play a massive role in negotiating wages and safety protocols. So by tracking how many workers are actually covered by these pacts, analysts can gauge the labor structure and kind of anticipate how future contract negotiations might impact day-to-day operations.
Now here's a really crucial, strict distinction SASB makes for this metric. When we calculate this collective agreement percentage, we are looking strictly at the active workforce. We're talking about individuals directly on the payroll, full-time, part-time, salaried, hourly, you name it. But we completely exclude contract workers. Anyone employed by a third party or a temp agency, they don't count here. It gives us a really pure, unclouded look at the entity's direct labor obligations.
Moving right along to Section 3, quantifying work stoppages.
So what happens when those labor relations break down? We aren't tracking every minor grievance here. For a disruption to actually hit the dashboard, it has to meet some pretty strict criteria. It needs to involve 1,000 or more workers, and it has to last for at least one full shift. And notice, this covers both sides of the fence. It includes strikes, which are initiated by the employees, and lockouts, which are initiated by the employers.
To turn these messy, complex disputes into a clean, trackable metric, we use a super simple three-step formula to calculate what's called total days idle. You literally just take the number of workers involved and multiply it by the duration of the stoppage in days. So if 1,000 workers strike for 5 days, boom, that's 5,000 total days idle. It's an incredibly powerful number for understanding just how much productivity went out the window.
Okay, let's switch gears. Section 4, workforce health and safety.
Time to boot up the second console on our dashboard. Because coal mining is inherently hazardous, we absolutely have to track 3 critical safety rates to really gauge a company's safety culture. We look at the all-incidence rate, which captures everything from days lost to serious medical treatments, the fatality rate, and finally, the near-miss frequency rate, or NMFR.
Let's zoom in on that last one, because it is fascinating. Tracking fatalities is obviously a given, but tracking the near-miss frequency rate, that is vital, because it acts as an early warning system. A near miss is basically an event that didn't result in an injury, but under slightly different circumstances definitely could have. By meticulously logging these near misses, a company can spot systemic risks and fix unsafe conditions before a real tragedy actually strikes.
All right, Section 5, calculating key safety rates.
We know what to track, but how exactly do we calculate these rates? Because think about it, how in the world do you compare the safety data of a massive global conglomerate against a tiny regional operation without completely skewing the numbers? If a huge company has 10 incidents and a tiny one has 5, the tiny one actually has a much worse record relative to its size. We need to level the playing field.
And this solution is this magic baseline number right here, 200,000. It's not just a random number. It elegantly represents 100 full-time employees working 40 hours a week for 50 weeks a year.
It gives us a perfectly standardized mathematical baseline to measure any company against, no matter how big or small they are. So here's how the math works in practice. You take your statistic count, let's say your number of near misses, you multiply it by that 200,000 baseline, and then divide the whole thing by the actual total number of hours worked by everyone that year. By doing this, we standardize the rate. We're looking at incidents per 100 full-time workers, which means we can finally compare apples to apples across the entire industry. It's a real game changer for analysts.
And here is the final fully built dashboard view. Notice something absolutely critical here. SASB doesn't just ask for these 3 safety rates. They require them to be strictly segmented. One column for direct employees and one column for contract employees. This is huge. In the past, a company might have had an awful safety record for its contractors, but buried that data by only reporting on direct hires. By forcing this split, the dashboard gives us total, uncompromised transparency into the actual safety culture.
Let's bring it all home. Section 6, the true cost of coal.
At the end of the day, why do all these human capital metrics matter to the bottom line? Well, this isn't just bureaucratic red tape. This data is a direct window into operational risk. Persistent labor disputes that result in thousands of days idle literally translate to delayed production and lost revenue. Sky-high accident rates mean massive remediation liabilities, regulatory fines, and eventually the loss of a company's social license to operate. If a company can't protect its people, its financial future is incredibly volatile.
So here's what I want you to take away from this explainer. Next time you're evaluating a high-hazard industry, ask yourself, how does the management of the workforce fundamentally dictate the financial future of the resources they extract? Because 1 million tons of coal sitting in the ground is completely worthless if the workforce isn't safe enough or stable enough to actually mine it. The dials on this dashboard are the key to unlocking that true valuation. Thanks for joining me, and as always, keep looking closely at the data.